This is an audio recording of a book that I wrote called Days of Deja Vu, which is available on Amazon.com. It's written by me, Jonathan Reid, and I will also be reading the first chapter as an audio version. And I hope that the viewer will excuse the production. Unfortunately, my studio, which is at home, does not block out the sounds of birds cooing and chickens crowing and dogs barking and the odd car passing by. So I apologize for that from the outset. So this is really an experiment with the first chapter as an audio version of Days of Deja Vu. Chapter 1. The weather had changed drastically during the night, and deja vu was rolling alarmingly. I crawled out of my bunk and went above deck to find a grey and unfriendly sky, aggravated by a freshening southeaster. My twin brother Gavin was up and dressing, and Mark, our young naval friend, was already out on deck. I don't like the look of this one little bit. We're on a lee shore and I can't tell if the anchor is still holding. It also looks as though the wind is freshening. I've heard it can really blow out here in the winter, I said, nervously. I don't like this either, replied Gavin tensely. We should seriously think about returning home. Home was Simonstown, about 20 miles across and down through False Bay. The bay formed at the southern tip of South Africa, Cape Point. This was meant to be a shakedown cruise for Deja Vu, as well as for Gavin and I, and quite frankly, I wanted to see how my home-built boat would handle in a blow. The usually optimistic Mark was looking decidedly green about the gills, and I felt a little sorry for him. This was a far cry from the rock-steady decks of a naval destroyer, manned by professional officers and awash with naval cadets. Yet to his credit, he put on a brave face. Gavin had started making coffee in the rolling cabin, and I went forward to check the anchor. To my dismay, it was gone. The line was slack in the dark water, and as I hauled it in, I could tell by the weight that we had lost it. Red skies in the morning. I found the frayed end, and I cursed my decision not to use chain. The wind continued to increase, and I imagined it to be about 25 knots. The seas were beginning to build, and tender Deja Vu was heaving to port and to starboard. Coffee was forgotten as we started the engine, hauled up the main and jib sails, and prepared to beat off the threatening black coast of Hunklip, a high, dark, and shadowy sea cliff. The seas appeared to be building with great speed, and the wind now started to whine through the wire rope of all the rigging. The temperature was falling as well. We were all silent. None of us had encountered really heavy weather on a small boat, and yesterday's bravado was quickly forgotten. Being the skipper and owner, I was responsible for all our safety, and I suggested we put on life jackets and safety harnesses. I also thought it would be prudent to notify the National Sea Rescue Institute by radio, which in retrospect was the smartest move I had made that day. The commanding officer immediately replied and asked for our position, which I attempted to give, downplaying the gravity of our predicament. "We are coming out to get you," he replied. "There's a big storm predicted, and if you are anywhere near where you say you are, you're in serious danger. We will keep in radio contact, but look out for us, and get some red distress flares ready. Keep your radio on. We should be there in about half an hour or so." "Roger that," I replied, trying to sound more confident and assured than I really was. As this latest bit of intelligence echoed about the damp cabin, the wind continued to whine high in pitch, and the rushing waves were now much louder and bolder, bursting against the hull with chilling force. I did not like it and noticed the others looking at me for assurance. I offered them a weak smile. "Gavin, can you grab the red Fleetson next to your bunk, please?" I relieved Mark, who was at the helm, attempting to keep Deja Vu on a course away from the shore, which was only about a mile or two astern. There was no sign of the sun, There was only a stormy, windswept grey sky now, and visibility was becoming fuzzy. It was difficult to see the horizon or the land. Coffee was attempted again, and this time a strong cup of sweet, condensed milky instant Java was handed out to us. Never had this sweet-smelling stuff been more welcome, and our spirits were buoyed somewhat from that hot liquid. The mainsail needed to be reefed down considerably, as the sheer size was overpowering the vessel, and I beckoned Mark to help me as Gavin took the helm. Just then a huge rogue wave broke over the coach house, soaking us, halting Deja Vu's forward motion. She heeled over alarmingly, and I yelled out in fear, "Let's get the bloody main down and get her nose into the wind." Deja Vu had a shallow keel with 2 steel plates alongside, forming a tripod, or a bilge keeler, in sailing terms. This was a useful feature in a high tidal area, where a boat might find itself high and dry, yet remain perfectly level. However, as we were finding out, the shallowness of these keels made for a tender boat with poor windward performance. Worse still, our 10 horsepower diesel engine was no match for these gathering seas, and we struggled vainly against the lee shore. Deja Vu was crashing about, and any item down below that was not properly stowed was rolling, crashing, smashing, or damaging her interior. I hurriedly peered below, and was dismayed to see such a frightful mess accumulating. Almost malevolently, it would seem. I was just averting my gaze when I saw something that made my blood curdle. The sole hatch was moving about on its own. In one move I sprang and landed below, and saw that the bilges were full of water, and that the water level was rising, causing the sole hatch to float about. "What the hell is leaking?" I screamed out to myself. "This is all we bloody need now. The goddamn boat is sinking." Just then there was a terrific crash as a huge wave slammed into her, and I struggled to regain my balance. I was exhausted and feeling quite seasick. The oily smell of the diesel-laced bilge water, the deafening clatter of the engine, and the violent motion, not to mention the claustrophobia of being down below, were really getting to me, and I was alarmed at our worsening predicament. As the pump was accessible only in the cockpit, I yelled up to someone to pump the bilges. I busied myself trying to see where we were taking on water. After checking all the through-hull fittings and finding them intact, I tasted the water and was relieved to find it was fresh water. The water tanks were the evident culprits, and while that was bad, it meant that there was a manageable limit to the quantity of water. It was then, as the only bilge pump died in mid-stroke, that I learnt firsthand about Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. The bilge pump made a horrible gasping sound and would not pump out any more water. A piece of garbage had been sucked in and jammed open one of the valves. We had other worries to keep us busy. Getting away from the lee shore was the priority. Nothing else mattered, and I took the helm and directed Gavin and Mark with sail setting and trim, whilst dodging deluges of salt water. The sound of the VHF radio came blaring out of the chaos in the cabin. "Deja vu, this is Pearl van Reid calling. Deja vu, do you copy, over?" I handed Gavin the helm, lurched below, and lifted the mic, returning the call. "Pearl van Reid, this is Deja vu, copy, over." "Deja vu, we are approximately in your area. Can you light a flare to pinpoint your position, please?" "Roger, Pearl van Reid, stand by one moment." I yelled up to Mark to light a flare, and within a minute he had a lighted red handheld flare, which he held up high. He started yelling loudly as the fiery hot tail of the flare burnt his hand, but the brave lad held on to the end. When he finally doubled up in pain, yelling unheard of naval obscenities, the radio crackled. "Deja vu, we've seen your flare and will be over there in a short while. Please keep a lookout for us." They were as good as their word, and soon a large, gleaming, orange-colored vessel appeared out of the gloomy maelstrom. It appeared to be traveling quite quickly, and the sudden feeling of relief overwhelmed us all. We were exhausted, cold, hungry, seasick and scared, and the very sight of that rescue craft was undescribable. We were to be saved, plucked from the path of a bad winter storm. Little did we know that our adventure was only just beginning. Winter storms off Cape Point were frequent and severe, and usually life-threatening, unless sailing in anything but an extremely seaworthy craft. I realized that Deja Vu, as she did not belong in this class at all, and that if I wanted to fulfill my lifelong ambition of a world cruise on a homemade boat, I had some work ahead of me. The rescue craft bobbed and weaved her way through the corridor of gigantic, angry waves. Smashing forcefully into them, she reared and bucked and positively flew over them in a magnificent show of spray and seamanship. We aboard the stricken Deja Vu giggled exhaustedly at the authority of the rescue close at hand. Drawing up almost alongside, but keeping a safe distance between the two violently rolling boats, we saw the figure of what appeared to be the skipper, sitting at the helm on the upper level of the steel structure of this muscular fishing boat. Deja vu, do you copy? Roger, Pearl van Reid answered tensely, hanging onto a grab rail in the cabin as the boat yawed about. We're going to try and tow you back to Simonstown. We will come closer and throw you a heaving line. Secure it to your strong point on the boat's bow. Do you copy? Roger that, skipper, and thank you very much, I replied. Soon a thin line came streaking across our bows and was immediately grabbed by Mark and Gavin. It was attached to a much heavier nylon warp. They hauled it in and grappled it to the stout Samson post in front. I remained at the helm. The boat still maintained a slight headway, remaining more stable than if we had doused the sail. But I decided to cut the engine for fear of fouling any lines in the propeller. I went forward to inspect the heaving line and was impressed by the size of the nylon warp. It seemed good and strong, and I gave the skipper the old thumbs up. Slowly the powerful launch came about and took up slack in the line. Suddenly it went taut, snapping up and shooting droplets everywhere. Deja Vu's nose swung around quickly, and we felt the strong, safe tug of powerful engines towing us back to safety. I called over to the others, suggesting we haul down the sails. It was late afternoon. The storm had not abated. In fact, if anything, it was worsening, and the Pearl van Reid and Deja Vu were ploughing through the largest waves I had ever seen. The motion was violent, and the sheets of spray were overpowering, soaking the whole length of Deja Vu. I was terrified that the Samson post would rip out of the deck. I clawed my way up to the bow occasionally to make sure the post was still intact, and came back utterly soaked and exhausted. Suddenly, out of nowhere, came the vision of an old blue wooden Cape fishing trawler, rolling heavily from side to side, ploughing through the waves. She was most likely headed for Simonstown. Pearl van Reid contacted us and confirmed that they too had seen the vessel. What seemed almost impossible to us was that she appeared to be heading right between the Pearl van Reid and Deja Vu. We attempted to call this vessel on the radio several times, but to no avail. Onward she ploughed, oblivious of our long towing warp connecting the two boats. When it appeared obvious that she wasn't going to change course, the Pearl van Reid slowed down to an almost abrupt stop to allow this floundering old fishpot to cut in front of the towing vessel, breaking a sacred mariner's rule by allowing her to pass between us, which she did without so much as an "excuse me." Now the Pearl van Reid took up slack a little too soon, owing to the nature of the seas, and with a loud bang, the 16-strand, 4-inch nylon towing warp snapped like a thread. It seemed that the whole world froze in that instant. No one wanted to believe what just happened. Once again, Deja Vu was adrift and turned beam on into the heavy dark seas, rolling and pitching terribly. We sat in startled disbelief, then sprang up and began screaming foul obscenities at the disappearing old vessel. She might as well have been a ghost ship for all we knew. The Pearl van Reid had begun maneuvering back to re-secure us, and again we were so grateful to see these men of the sea. The skipper came back on the radio, and we decided to try again. This time it was felt that due to the failing light and the worsening weather, they would tow us down along the coast eastward to a little fishing village called Hermanus. Clearly it was the most logical choice, as towing Deja Vu through this storm was becoming foolhardy and very risky. It was also mean that we aboard Deja Vu for several more hours in the very thick of the foul weather, and we were really tired, hungry and cold. We wanted this to end as soon as possible. Once again, we tied up the heaving towing warp and were forced about by the powerful launch, which began towing us east and downwind of the storm. We aboard Deja Vu found this to be far less stressful and a lot drier. The waves weren't crashing over the bows, and the motion appeared to be easier. We began to cheer up a little. We even joked about that damn ghost fishing boat. And of course, when Gavin brought out hot mugs of canned soup, things looked decidedly better. I learnt another valuable lesson about sailing. A hot meal always raises one's morale, no matter how bad things get. Darkness fell quickly, and we could recognize the Pearl van Reid by her clattering diesels and colorful auras of navigation lights. I flicked our lights on as well. Deja Vu's helm had to be manned during the entire tow, and we took turns steering. This was becoming increasingly difficult now, as the wind had increased in speed and created large running swells. Deja Vu was careening down the face of these mountainous waves, and the acceleration was dangerous and very frightening. Hanging on to the lively tiller was becoming almost impossible, and the boat was virtually out of control. We were being towed at about 8 knots, and when she sped down the face of these large, angry black waves with white foaming crests, she yawed wildly about and sped up around 15 knots or so. I was very afraid that her bow might sink in, and we would be pitchforked forward with disastrous results. The radio broke from the gloomy cabin. "Deja Vu, do you copy?" "Roger," I cried, scrambling down below. "How's it going?" I asked fearfully. "Deja Vu, it's not too good. I'm afraid we are still a long way from Hermanus. It's getting late, and we've just received an update from the Weather Bureau. Things are expected to worsen quite a lot, and frankly, we aren't making any progress. I'm afraid we have only one choice, and that is to abandon your boat and run for Hermanus." I sat in disbelief as the words sank in. I was to abandon this beautiful yacht that I had built with my bare hands? The 4 years of sweat and toil were to be abandoned to the first storm Deja Vu encountered? Not bloody likely. I clenched the mic. "Pearl van Reid, I copy what you are saying, and I appreciate the situation. However, I don't intend leaving my boat here under any circumstances. I think my 2 crew would be happy going with you, but I will take my chances." I could see the crew of the Pearl van Reid raising their eyebrows and saying, "Oh God, he's going to go down with his boat." Well, that was how I felt, and I was going to stick to it. I was too exhausted to make any rational decisions. Actually, we all were. "Deja Vu, we are going to cease towing, and will come alongside your vessel to throw you a line to attach to your waists. Tie a knot of your own choice, and on the signal, jump into the water, and we will haul you over. Please cast the towing rope adrift." I started to disagree with them, but both Gavin and Mark turned on me in tired anger and vented their feelings. My head was swimming with confusion. I too was angry and yelled back at them. "This is my damn boat. I built it and I am going to stay on board. I'll be all right for Christ's sake." I think the NSRI skipper cleared my head when he firmly stated that he and his crew had risked their lives and their boat to come out in the storm to save our lives, not our boat. It was getting late. They were also tired and hungry, and it was the only option. He sounded quite irritable. With a heavy heart, I made my way up to the bow and undid the tow rope as bid. Immediately Deja Vu presented her beam to the huge seas, and I could not believe the violent rolling that ensued. How she was not rolled over is beyond my ken. We all just hung on for dear life in that black, wet and frightening night as the boat heaved wildly in one of the worst storms the Cape had seen in several years. The Pearl was soon alongside us, about 20 feet away, and had some powerful spotlights aimed on Deja across the churning black water. After numerous attempts, a small heaving line came snaking out of the dark sky and landed across our stricken vessel. The ashen and tired faces of Gavin and Mark struck home, and I felt ashamed of my foolish outbursts. They had been wonderful companions and constantly willing and hard-working crew. Mark was the first to tie the line about his waist, and with both thumbs up and a blast from the Pearl's horn, he bravely jumped into the freezing cold Atlantic water and was immediately hauled in. Gavin was next. I patted his shoulder and wished him good luck. I went to the bow again and cast out the remaining anchor with all its line, making sure that the bitter end was secure. I then went down below, and turning on all the cabin lights and radios, I looked about for the last time, thinking that if she was to go down, she would go down in style. I lashed the helm amidships, closed all the hatches, and said a little prayer for her. The line snaked overhead, and I tied a granny knot about my waist. There are many fancy knots at sea, but I knew the old granny wouldn't let me down, and I jumped into the freezing water. It stung my face and limbs, forcing the air out of my lungs. Gasping in air, I struck towards the Pearl and felt a strong tug on the line as the crew hauled me over and up her side. Immediately after, I collapsed on the deck. A large wooden blanket was thrown around me, wildly shivering body. I could hardly breathe from the cold, and my teeth clattered uncontrollably as I tried to thank the crew. I saw Gavin and Mark also wrapped in blankets and shaking crazily. My first reaction was to burst into tears, and I'm not ashamed to say it felt damn good. I cried for those of us aboard poor Deja, for the bloody awful day we had had, and for the sad turn of events. I cried for the loss of such a lovely boat, and for the gratitude that we all were now feeling for having been rescued from such an ugly, stormy sea. We were helped into the warm interior of the launch, and a feeling of power and safety emanated below from the din of the two hot diesel engines bubbling beneath the soles of our feet. Understanding crew handed us hot coffee laced with whiskey and lots of sugar, and slowly our shivering abated, and my tears turned to embarrassment, for which I apologized. The arrival of a rescue craft in Hermanus caused quite a stir, even at midnight. The journey had taken approximately 3 hours, and we were all cold, tired, and hungry. I was in a daze. I had managed to lose my boat at sea. All these hard, fun-filled, wonderful years building her were wasted. I could not believe what had happened. Just what was I going to tell my beloved wife? She was going to be devastated. I had almost killed myself and my brother and my friend, not to mention the other lives I had jeopardized in the rescue effort. I saw the curious onlookers at the little dock, heard the excited buzzing, and saw the sympathy on some of the kindly faces in this small fishing town. I was in shock, and I was helped off the boat by willing hands. Food was awaiting us at the little hotel, and we assigned rooms in which to sleep. The warm meal, security, steadiness, and quiet of the hotel, along with a large mug of sweet, brandy-laced chocolate, lulled me into a deep slumber. I awoke to friendly hotel sounds, but the grim picture of the day before suddenly flooded back, and I hurriedly dressed and went to wake Mark and Gavin. I went outside to find an absolutely gorgeous day. The wind had completely died down, and the sun was hot on my face. There was not a cloud to be seen, and the air felt washed and clean. There was a brightness to the day which contrasted so strongly with the angry events of the day before. I walked down to the dock and saw the Pearl and her crew, We exchanged greetings, and they kindly offered their sympathy. I noticed they were refueling and asked them what their plans were. "We're headed back this morning, Jonathan, but you're welcome to join us. We can search for your boat, but we cannot spend too much time. Unfortunately, our job is to save lives." "Yes," I replied, "I understand. We really appreciate what you did for us yesterday, and definitely do want to go back with you to search for the boat." Gavin and Mark appeared, both looking a bit weary but ready to get going. I could tell that their spirits rose along with the thrilling high-pitched revving of the two monster diesel engines. The view from the flying bridge was vast and commanding, and I felt my hopes rising that Deja would be found safe and sound. The skipper hugged the coastline, and we were able to see in bright daylight what we had missed the night before. I could see why the old sailors called it the Ferris Cape. From the sea it was a symphony of green, undulating hills, woody foliage that changed colour, quaint fishing cottages complete with broken, wind-bent, split-pole fences, and wisps of smoke rising up through whitewashed chimneys. The roar of the engines brought me back, and I searched about the horizon for any boat-like objects. "We are still a long way from where we left her, Jonathan," the skipper said kindly, reading my mind. "We have another hour of travelling before we can expect to see anything." Slowly the minutes ticked by, and we were all lost in thought. The droning of the engines was hypnotic, and we fell silent. I was jolted out of my reverie by the skipper saying, "Somewhere about here we should start scanning the horizon." Of course she must have drifted quite a lot in that wind, but she couldn't have gone too far. A pair of binoculars was produced, and we all had turns searching the vast blue expanse. We saw several albatross wheeling about. Frigates were most likely plummeting for sardines, and the usual seagulls were flocking and bobbing about. But all the black spots turned out to be seabirds. We did spot a few fishing boats on their way to work or busy fishing, oblivious to our purpose. After a lengthy search and several false alarms, the skipper announced that it was time to head back to the station, and sadly I nodded my head. I caught the sympathetic glances from all aboard, and I tried to smile, but I fooled no one. The course was altered away from the coast in order to clear the point, and we all fell silent again. I had a dark, heavy pain in my stomach, and I felt that my heart was breaking. I just couldn't believe that my beloved Deja was gone, smashed up and sunken somewhere in these calm blue waters. Contemplating what this all meant, I suddenly noticed a very thin, pencil-like line on the horizon. Excitedly, I pointed this out to Gavin. "Look, over there near the shore. See that thin vertical line? That could be a mast." He shook his head. "No, I don't think so. It's a tree or something. It's too thin to be a mast. Although you never know." I had a moment of doubt and did not want to cry wolf, as there had been quite a few false alarms. Then I thought sternly, any speck on the horizon is worth checking out. This is Deja we're talking about. "Excuse me, skipper, I think there is something over there on the horizon near the shore," I pleaded. He looked a little irritated at first, then seeing my face he softened and said in a low voice, "Then we will have to go and investigate, won't we?" I could tell he was a true seaman, and he knew what I was going through. The growling pearl ferret sped over in the direction of the lion I had seen. I noticed one of the crew peering through the binoculars and pointing out in that direction. All aboard were silent as the moments ticked by. We could not be sure of the mirage-like line, although I could swear it was getting bigger. Suddenly from the south we heard the drone of a small single-engined plane and managed to spot the silver glint on a pair of wings. Whoever they were, they had either seen us headed in that direction, or they may have heard the earlier radio report from the Sea Institute putting a salvage ban on the abandoned yacht at sea, and had been searching regardless. Now my hopes were soaring. People out there had seen something too. As we drew closer, I began to see a dark smudge below the thin line, and I just knew that that was my déjà vu. Sure enough, it was soon very obvious that it was a sailboat under bare poles wallowing back and forth about a mile offshore. A loud cheer erupted from all of us, and I could see genuine smiles of happiness. Somehow we were all personally tied to this drama. All had a sense of loss, and now we shared a tremendous sense of triumph as we closed in on the plucky little vessel. I fought back stinging tears and was shocked to count twice in 2 days how this boat had caused such emotion. It was decided by the good captain to tow her back to Hermanus, and we once again made haste to secure a good strong line to her bow. Now 30 years have passed under her new, deeper and heavier keel, and Deja Vu has sailed many thousands of adventurous miles across lakes, oceans and seas. She has seen many terrifying storms, near misses, and careless groundings on beaches and reefs. She has had the pleasure of visiting many different islands and anchorages around the world, and has delighted and made friends with hundreds who have sailed on her. This is our story.